We're looking for more and more ways where we could be involved internationally, cooperating with other countries and helping them deal with this situation. Thank you.
Okay, so
I see there are two written questions.
we'll move to the first question from the chat. How much influence do the scientists have in Israel have on the government? I won't read the second part dealing with the situation in England, in the UK, but Dr. Shalmon, do you think that...
Okay, so I would say in a bit humoristic view that they have too much influence. And from the beginning of this pandemic, the prime ministers, the two of them had a habit to invite scientists, independent scientists, and to listen. And I have to tell you that the nice thing about science, it's a pluralism of ideas. So you could find the whole range of ideas from saying it's nothing should be done, just let it naturally run ahead, to very strict ideas of what should be done, including national closures. So if you do follow our scientists, which like some of them love interviews, both locally and internationally, a bunch of them are also advising on a regular basis the government upon the head of the Ministry of Health. We do believe in pluralism of ideas, but in a point where a decision should be made, not necessarily every brilliant physicist or mathematician which has a beautiful theoretical model have the right answer. And we need to balance properly between listening to fresh ideas, but you need to confront them with reality of life and look for the proper solution. I have to tell you that during the COVID, on a daily basis, we had 5 different mathematical models to predict the waves, and each university had its own model, and every day we would show the 5 models together and a figure. So we had a nice graph of that, not always having the same opinion of how things would and will develop. In general, I think scientists are still a fundamental, a major, I would say, pillar in the fight against COVID. And in that sense, we have to keep the opportunity of people to express their opinion, even if they are not along with, I would say, any type of a official opinion of somebody.
Thank you, Dr. Shalmon, and we'll move for the first question from the audience, Doug Walker.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm interested in learning what kind of travel restrictions are being predicted for Israel this summer. I am with a group in near Atlanta in the United States who is trying to plan a trip there in June of this year, and I'm just kind of trying to get a feel for what kind of restrictions and requirements may be in place. I know that's a long way off.
Well, Doug, you first need to give me a good prophet of what is going to happen with COVID this summer. So I could predict whatever I predict. It's like almost a monkey selection. In my own opinion, I do believe that we are now entering the last year of COVID as a pandemic. It's not going to disappear totally, but as a major pandemic. But my guess is good as anybody else. I could look into history and try to assess what had finished previous pandemics and what would be the mechanism. Some people would even try to speculate that Omicron is part of the signs of the end of this pandemic. I'm not sure that is the truth, so I can't say it. If we'll be on the optimistic line, meaning that we will be between waves, so after the whole business, Israel is going to be fully open. If, God forbid, we'll see a terrible new variant that would again shake the bubble and change everything, so who knows? We do understand the major damage that closures and international traveling restrictions impose on both local industries and certainly about the connection of Israel with many of its family members and friends and other tourists and visitors that need or want to come here. So that is always a combination trying to balance between the needs. And as you have seen, we were very quick to close the borders immediately when the Omicron story started. We were very quickly, we actually quite quickly last week opened everything when we understood that we have a massive community-based spread and there's no use to keep the borders closed anymore. So as you know, everybody could travel now as long as they're fully vaccinated.
Okay, Dr. Salmon, I'll just add another question about the same issue from the chat. What is the possibility of children being allowed in by Pesach, by Passover?
I can't tell you what would be our policy in 3 months from now, but I could imagine that our point of view is that as long as children could be vaccinated, they're required to be vaccinated to come in. So as you know, in Israel now, vaccines are open for everybody above the age of 5. I do believe till April, that would be expanded even for any age above 6 months of age. And in that sense, at least as much as my opinion would be counted, I think we should stick to the policy of allowing free traveling of tourists which are fully vaccinated, and that includes also kids.
And we'll move to Julie Stow.
Hi, yes, I have 2 questions. I'm here in Israel. I want to know what the protocol is actually for treating COVID when people first are diagnosed, are medicines prescribed? What are they told to do besides isolate? And if medicines are prescribed, what are they? And also, I'd like to know what's being done to promote Israeli research into the vaccines even or treatments for COVID. I know there are things going on, but we hear very little about it.
As I have mentioned before, we are now prescribing on community basis oral medications to diminish the replication process of the virus among individuals which has the potential of deteriorating to a severe case. That means people with high risk parameters or the elderly population. The basic idea is to give it early enough to prevent hospitalization, not only critical cases and God forbid deaths, but also to prevent hospitalization. So we do believe that although these medications, both Pfizer and Merck, are quite expensive or ridiculously expensive for some markets, I think it's still, I would say, cost effective to give them early and to reduce the number of hospitalization cases in the country. So that's what is done. We are using monoclonal antibodies of Regeneron for subgroups of patients with a very high risk potential, and that is of course given intravenously only in hospital settings. Otherwise, of course, the whole battery of supportive treatment is available, and you have to understand that the point of preventing overwhelming of hospitals is not only because there will be no beds, but rather we would not be able to give an optimal treatment. And people, at least with the previous variant, did die in many countries due to overloading and suboptimal treatment due to lack of personnel and due to lack of equipment. And that is, I would say, an issue that we would like to avoid. And thanks God, till now, in the previous 4 waves, we were able to avoid. So at no point in Israel, at least, we had to select somebody for a ventilator, yes or no. Nothing of that had happened. And that is a good explanation. Why did we take some, I would say, swift steps quite early? I do hope we would not see overwhelming at this point with the current wave, but again, it's a question of numbers.
There's another question from the chat. Isn't it a concern to give the fourth vaccine so soon without any long-term studies?
Yes, it's always a concern. Nobody ought to give any type of medication without full, proper, good evidence-based results out of good clinical trials. That is not a question. If we are dealing here with a new cancer drug or ordinary infectious drug, that would be the process, and that would take a few years. If we are talking about new vaccinations for any sort of issue which is not, doesn't have a pandemic form, again, that takes years. We are dealing with an emergency situation here. And it's not just a slogan. It's a fact, and that is the reason why FDA was going all the way with this emergency approvals. I have to say that, of course, that we have concern. And we had concern when we have started vaccinating at all in the beginning. We had certainly concerns when we have started almost the first in the world to give the third dose. And we had to gather information of 2 million Israelis till we could say clearly that it is safe, and actually the rest of the world had followed us. And we are concerned now, and that is the reason why we are not offering the fourth vaccine for everybody, but rather only for high-risk groups.
Thank you. There's another question from the chat regarding the same issue from Daniel Avisi. He talked about, you talked about the idea of an annual shot along with the flu shot. Is this your personal opinion, or is Israel working towards something?
Strictly personal opinion. I think everybody would agree that that is a good solution if it would be feasible and safe. And you know, we are anyhow combining usually 4 types of flu viruses in the annual vaccine. So it's a good idea, and actually the companies are working. So it's not a new idea. It's quite, I think, a common notion in the professional world. Whether it would happen or not, I don't know. It depends a lot how COVID is going to develop. You know, one day we may wake up, there will be no new fresh case of COVID in the world at that day. And it would happen. It's not the truth. And then, of course, it's a question whether COVID would become, as other coronaviruses, a kind of a respiratory seasonal infection, usually very benign in nature, or we would still have it as a problem, even as a local endemic problem. And then I do believe that we may vaccinate against it.
Thank you. And we'll move back to the chat, to the audience. And there's Zaidi. I hope I pronounce it right. Yes, unmute yourself. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. When we were in Israel, we took the first 2 shots as Pfizer. We were in the States and took the first booster as Moderna. Now we're trying to get the second booster. And we're told that because we had Moderna, we can only get Moderna, which sounds ridiculous to me. So I'd like to know, that's my first question. I'd like to know, do we really have to stick to that, or will somebody tell Maccabi to give us our second booster? The other question is, my wife had a terrible reaction to the Moderna booster, and she's wondering, is it better not to take the booster or to go through it again? She was out of commission for 3 days.
These are pure clinical questions. Regarding the first question, I don't see any reason why not to receive another Pfizer. If you have a problem with Maccabi, contact me directly and I'll speak to Maccabi. Regarding the second issue, of course, it's always a question. If you did experience a bothering side effects from a previous dose, you would be reluctant of taking the next one. It doesn't necessarily mean that you would suffer badly for the next one, but it is a consideration. So it's always a balance between risk factors, age, and other, I would say, pre-existing medical conditions with the potential risk of feeling bad again for a while.
Thank you.
Didn't really.
Upon the personal question, I think it's best to discuss it with your GP.
Exactly. And we'll move to Dana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My question is regarding the Green Pass. I want to know what the justification is for continuing it on the citizens and business owners if the vaccine is no longer preventing the spread of coronavirus.
So we do believe that the vaccine still has an effect in reducing the risk of being infected, and it certainly has an effect reducing severe forms of the disease. In that sense, although the Omicron give us some challenges, including with issues of the Green Pass, I do believe that the Green Pass is an important, not only medical, but rather social tool in the, I would say, the global combat against this pandemic.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question, such as the nice lady before who, needs to take her own risk factors into effect. Why does that mean that she shouldn't be able to enter a movie theater, let's say, if her doctor advises her against taking the vaccine due to a poor reaction?
Because in Israel, not as most European countries, we are allowing people that from any reason are not vaccinated to take an antigen test and then enter. And we do still believe that the risk of unvaccinated people, not only for Omicron, but certainly for Delta, is much higher than vaccinated people. I have to say that although we are talking day and night about Omicron, Delta still exists. In some countries, it's still around 50% or more of cases. And at least in Israel, I could tell you that we do see every day fresh cases of Delta. So it's not that Omicron came and that is the end of any other variant. And I do believe, deeply believe, that vaccines are, it's not a single layer, it's not a unidimensional tool. Unfortunately, we have to use multidimensional
Right, no, I understand that. But it's
they are the most important tool that we have in our hands to end this pandemic.
But for people who, the risk calculation doesn't make sense to them, it's a big responsibility the government takes on by saying that they can't enter certain places. That's a huge responsibility.
We don't say. I have to put it clear and sharp. We do not say. It's not like most EU countries where if you are not vaccinated from any reason, you can't enter these entertainment venues. We do give a chance for everybody to enter, but then you just need to take an antigen test before.
But the vaccinated people can pass it, so they should also pass.
We are balancing it, and my personal view, I'm not sure I would be so liberal if I'm not sure that antigen testing is good enough in that sense, but that was a kind of, I would say, balance that our government decided upon. And I do understand the argument, why should we do so? So everybody is allowed in as long as they are all vaccinated or tested.
And there's another question from the chat. It comes from the UAE, and it says from Rosie, Israel is now behind dozens of countries in terms of vaccinations, with fewer than 65% of the population receiving a dose. What went wrong? What is the Ministry of Health doing to reach those unvaccinated people?
So I would say, first of all, we are much above 65%.
We're not.
Figures. If we are talking anybody that received at least a single dose. So I could grab out the numbers, but I think we are in the 6 and something million of them. Anyhow, but there are two issues to say and two different approaches. The first part is Israel is a very young society with a large portion of the population which is minors, which are youngsters and children. And of course, these groups tend to be less vaccinated. Some of them, of course, below the age of 5 can't even be vaccinated, even if they wish to be. And the answer for that is to continue on advocating for vaccinating the whole population as indications allow us. In a point, as I have predicted, we would be allowed, of course, after FDA approval, to vaccinate even younger kids. Regarding the elderly population, which is not with no real justification being vaccinated, it's around 800,000 Israelis. among them is a small group of devoted anti-vax people. Nothing would convince them to vaccinate. They are sure that, or it's a kind of a big conspiracy by the companies or by governments or by who knows what, or it has some other terrible effect. I think the arguments about that it's experimental and not well tested, I think it's over. Still, I think like more than 3 billion people were already vaccinated worldwide. So I think we have a strong core of evidence, more than any other medication in history, about the safety of these vaccines. So you can't convince them. But we still have a large group of people which are hesitant. They had listened or read to podcasts, Facebook chats or posts, YouTube or whatever of certain individuals which were preaching against vaccines. Some of them are from the religious world, not major figures, but people like Amnon Yitzhak in Israel, which has his own followers, and some of them are from different sectors. And that is a constant, I would say, approach to discuss openly, transparently. We must be transparent, both on the advantages, but also about risk and disadvantages, and at the same time to explain why is it safe and beneficial for the individual person to be vaccinated. So that's what we are doing about it. We are not imposing laws like in some European countries where now I saw that in Italy from the age of 50, it is mandatory to be vaccinated, and a few other European countries discuss the option of having mandatory vaccines. Well, we are not there. It is not under our political nature to do so, and I don't think it is feasible here. And I don't think it's necessary here. We are not going to force anybody to vaccinate, but we still have to convince and to explain and to discuss and to make it attractive and accessible for people to be vaccinated.
I'll just add, Ashi, that close to 75% of Israelis have received at least one vaccination.
Yeah, I said it in the beginning, Daniel.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador, for adding that. And we'll move to Kapak. I hope I pronounced your name right.
Thank you. My name is Kruno Capak. Hello to everybody. I have two questions. The first is, now we know that the booster dose started because of the decreasing of the immunity, of humoral immunity. And what is about the fourth dose? Do you have any signal from the investigations from humoral immunity of the people in Israel? What was the reason to start the fourth dose of the vaccine? And the second question is, I don't know whether you had in Israel mismatching of the vaccines, and if you had, what was the result? Was better mismatching with messenger RNA vaccines regarding the immunity of the people, the humoral immunity of the people, or it was better to have only one messenger RNA vaccine? Thank you.
So I'll try to answer the two questions. Of course, the reason of choosing or deciding upon fourth dose for high-risk subgroups was due to some finding of the efficacy of the vaccines, not only for Omicron, but in general. Quite a similar curve as it was seen for after the second dose. It's not as sharp as, so it's not indicated as strongly as the third dose was, but certainly we did see this laning out of the efficacy of the vaccines. We have preliminary results regarding the effectiveness of the fourth dose, but in my point of view, it's much too early and immature now to discuss it. Let's wait another 2 or 3 weeks, and I think we will have more, I would say, substantial data regarding the studies upon the fourth vaccine. I guess that would be in the benefit of the whole world. regarding mismatch of vaccines, Israel took, I would say, extreme, in the worldwide extreme attitude where the 99% of the population was all vaccinated only with Pfizer, so messenger RNA from one type. We do have some Moderna. We have a small amount of AstraZeneca, but I think only a few thousand got it. We are aware of studies which potentially had positive results when by combining different forms or types of vaccines. We don't have this experience. As I have mentioned, that 99% of the population is covered by a single type of vaccine. I have to say that mismatching vaccine is not a common practice among other types of medical conditions or vaccines. But it is quite an intriguing and interesting and potentially productive approach, if that would be proven to be the right thing to do. Again, we do expect to see differences in incentive of the type of antibodies as well as cellular immunity due to exposure to different antigen when for messenger RNA as well with adenovirus vehicle vaccines like AstraZeneca, we are using only a small portion of the spike. When we are talking about, I would say, the version of the virus as the Chinese have done, we potentially are opening the immune system to a much wider range of antigens, sorry. But I have to say that at least as what we have seen till now, the Chinese vaccines, at least the ones which are common in the world, the Sinovac and Sinopharm, did not produce a better immunity in comparison to the newer technologies. So it seems that although messenger RNA technology is relatively, I would say, a breaking new technique, it seems to be, or seems to create the best immunity from the whole variety of vaccines. We did not know it from the beginning. If you would ask me at March, April 2020, what do I bet is going to be the leading vaccine, I would bet upon the viral vehicle vaccines like AstraZeneca. So, you know, we had to learn many things as this pandemic had advanced, and you have to be foolish to stick to your opinion. You have to admit when, of course, that you are wrong.
Thank you. And we have the Ministry of Health from Turkmenistan here with us.
Good evening, Ashgabat.
Ashgabat?
Yes, this is Ashgabat. Hello. And the question is basically, has there been general research done on the general effectiveness of vaccines? So what was the change after the vaccination in population happened? What is the research saying about that? Thank you.
I'm not sure I got the question. What is the research saying about what?
What is the research saying about general effectiveness of vaccines altogether? So not just the fourth, together, what would be the research results? Thank you.
Well, I think it's clear. There is a bright side and a dark side to my answer. It is obvious that vaccines work and do produce immunity. It is obvious that this immunity is clinically effective, both in reducing the risk of infectious and reducing the risk of developing a severe and a lethal form of the disease. That is a bright side. The dark side is that these vaccines seems to lane out quickly, mostly because we're dealing with a new form of a virus which was not known to the human body, to the human organ before, and the body, the machinery, our immune machinery is finding it a bit complicated to maintain proper memory. And the whole issue is about immune memory And that is less bright than the other fact, and that means that the efficacy of these vaccines is fading out, laying out, and we need to boost them. I do understand some frustration that we all have regarding the fact that Omicron, which is presenting a very different, I would say, molecular feature, in that sense, some differences in the structure of the virus, is somehow quite resistant to vaccines. The nice part about Omicron that it went through drastic changes, which also changed most probably the form of the clinical disease that it creates. So in that sense, it's a balance. So if I have to conclude my answer, I think vaccines, as I have said before, are not a unidimensional tool. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of this pandemic just by vaccinating. It is a combined operation where vaccines are a major pillar, but still we'll have to take also other measures till the end of this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Shalmon. And there's another Ministry of Health here from Slovakia, and they're asking on the chat, would Israel share with them the vaccination effectiveness data from the 4th vaccine dose?
Absolutely, yes. And my message is very clear, and Daniel and Leo are here. They know that I'm always happy to speak with all of our friends, including in Bratislava. We did it before, and we'll be happy to do it in the future.
Thank you, Doctor. And please contact the embassy, and we'll put you in touch with our Dr. Shalmon, and we'll move to Julio Maravilla. Julio, the floor is yours.
Hi, Julio Mirabales from Spain.
Mirabales, sorry.
Don't worry. I have two questions. First is about masks that are mandatory in the streets and in open places in some countries like Spain. And my question is if it is something that helps, it is necessary. The second one is it has been told that Omicron variant spreads so quickly, but with a low effect on the people. So to get lots of people infected can help to end the pandemic, to get the herd immunity. What do you think about it?
Okay, so we'll start with the first question. Masks. Masks are extremely cheap, inexpensive tool, which give, I would say, a substantial result in reducing the risk of being infected or being mostly infecting others. So our approach is, if that makes sense, and it's so inexpensive and not very difficult, as we all know in the Far East, people tend every winter to wear masks, then we should use this tool. As I was talking about multidimensional tools, so that is another pillar in our combat against COVID. We did free out masks at the open space. So for a while, for many months, it was not obligatory anymore in Israel, but we did introduce it recently due to the Omicron. So if you are gathering outside, you need to use masks. If you're just walking in the street, you're free of masks. Regarding closed spaces, certainly I think it's a very beneficial and inexpensive tool to be used. Regarding your nice speculation about Omicron being part of the solution in sense of creating herd immunity, of course, many individuals all over the globe had speculated so, and I did as well. Unfortunately, the main difference between me or us and people that could express their opinion that we have massive responsibility about the resilience of our health system. In that sense, we can't just speculate and say it's okay, let's let it happen. It may, I'm not excluding it, but we have to remember that herd immunity was not proven to be a factor in this pandemic till now. So even places like Manaus, Brazil, and regions in India, which had a massive spread, seems not to develop a real herd immunity. And then a new variant comes, and also individuals who had recovered from a previous variant are being infected. It is very different, let's say, from measles. Basically, when you got measles, you are now well protected for a huge time. I mean, for years, for many years. And that is true for many other viral infections, not to this specific type of single strand RNA viruses. Just to remind what I'm talking about, if we are talking commonly about influenza, about flu, again, that the fact that you were infected by flu last year doesn't mean that you are protected this year. It has to do with
Thank you. As we approach the last few minutes of this press conference, and we promised Dr. Shalmon that by 5 p.m. Israel time, we will be free. I'm pretty sure I won't get to the 44 new messages that are waiting for me in the chat, and I'll try to get all of you the answers, and we'll try to reschedule another or to schedule another press conference with Dr. Shalmon. And we see this is a very hot and interesting topic. Before that, we have a few more questions here. Christina, are you with us, Christina? So Christina is not with us, and we'll move to Alemka.
Yes, Alemka Markotic from Zagreb, Croatia. Good afternoon to everybody. Hi, sorry.
Christina, 1 minute. We'll be back with you in a second.
I have two questions also, and one is I'm not sure what to think about the fourth dose in 1 year. I was very much in favor about the third dose, and I'm sorry that EU countries didn't follow Israel in the early autumn, and I think we could have much better situation. But however, the question is, do we have any relevant data about the memory cells? And I think from the view of some immunologists that it is not reasonable for our immune system to keep all the time the high level of specific antibodies. It's about the memory cells to actually act immediately when we contact with the virus, and then to push our production of immune cells. So I'm specific antibodies. I'm not sure, do we really need 4 doses in 1 year? However, I don't know answer as many others. And the second question is, do you have any data about the severity of Omicron clinical picture in unvaccinated people, especially in the risk population?
Okay, so the first question, of course, has to do with the fourth dose, and I have to say, as I have said before, it's not a clear-cut, simple decision to give it. I am aware of these immunological theories about the mechanism where cellular memory is working by, and whether boosting so quickly after the second and the third dose makes sense. I think on the practical level, we did see a huge benefit. And I think now you could see this benefit in many other countries of giving the third dose. Regarding the fourth dose, I don't know. I think I'll have better answers in 2 weeks from now. We are testing it in various systems. We are running a big clinical study among healthcare providers which were vaccinated with the fourth dose. And I do believe that we would have better answers in 2 weeks from now.
Alemka, if I can add one word, Ashi. Alemka, you are from Zagreb, and we are very pleased that our colleague and friend Dr. Arnon Shachar was a guest of the Croatian government 2 months ago. Dr. Salmon sent him there, and he worked with your government on the issue of how to explain the importance of vaccinations. So this was this close collaboration between the Israeli health services and the Croatian government, and a good example of how we are cooperating. We worked with Dr. Tsapak in your country. I'm sure you know him.
Yeah, I know him. We are collaborating all the time, and I was at that meetings, and we discussed that very well, and it was very useful. I'm very much in favor with the vaccination, but the question was whether really we need fourth dose in a short period of time. But I know that nobody don't know the answer on it. But
You're welcome to
leave some more time for other questions. And Christina, your turn again.
Hi, sorry everybody. Christina, Bosnia and Herzegovina, proud Mashhad alumni. So I have, after everything, just one question. Do we have the knowledge to how to end this pandemic with the circumstances that they are regarding vaccination, losing population compliance, no effective medication, over-testing? I'm concerned that we as a medical community are starting to become part of the problem, not the part of the solution. Are we just waiting this thing to die out?
If I would have a simple solution, I think I would be announced as a prophet or win the Nobel Prize. But unfortunately, I don't have it, and I don't think anybody has it. I think we're trying to do our best, and I don't think we, as a medical community or medical authorities, are the problem, but rather we are facing a huge challenge, and it's a long-lasting, tiring. I started my speech by joking about that. It's 20 years is much too much for any reasonable human being. I don't think excluding science, excluding health, excluding epidemiology would assist anybody in sense of fighting properly this pandemic. I think the pandemic would die anyhow, like any pandemic in history have died. That is not the issue. This pandemic is not going to kill mankind, and this pandemic would not end in sense of many, many more million dead people. That's my assumption. I hope I'm right. But still, I am sure that we have to continue on, although we are exhausted and our societies are suffering from, I would say, a major fatigue. We need to stick on to this struggle till it ends. And we have to learn. It's trial and error, and many things are still on the bench and we don't have clear answer for. So we have to modify our policies. Not what we were doing when the pandemic have started is feasible anymore, and not necessarily what we are doing now were the things that we would consider in the past, like switching between PCRs and antigen testing. But still saying that, I don't think we are the health community the problem of this. We are trying to give our, I would say, humble support to our nations, to our societies, to our people in order to survive in the best way this pandemic. Again, I do believe that it's only a question of time, not too long till this form of disease as a pandemic would be over.
And on that happy note, I'm gonna thank you, Dr. Shalmon, and I want to thank you, Ambassador Meron, for joining us, and all of you, over 200 people that were that tune in for our international press conference. We'll definitely do that again soon. hopefully celebrating the end of COVID very soon. As we said when we started, when this tradition is a temporary thing, we just until you can all come and visit in Israel and see our reality for yourself. Till then, we are sending pieces of Israel once a week with these Zoom conferences, and we're very happy and we appreciate a lot your participants week after week. For those of you that join us the first time this year, so Happy New Year. We'll hope that this new year will represent the end of COVID and going back, or the beginning of going back to our normal lives as we used to know them. Till then, until our next time, keep safe and hope to see you soon. Thank you again, Dr. Shalmon and Ambassador Meron. And I want to thank also Shani Rappaport, my assistant, that organized this briefing today. Goodbye.
Recording stopped.